And the GCSB bill passed with a majority of 1 this week. And now its companion law is the focus of critics, who will extend the obligations of the telecommunications industry to assist our security agencies, the GCSB, with surveillance. It's called the Telecommunication Interception, Capability and Security Bill, and it's under select committee consideration. A report is due out on it later next month. It lays out what the likes of Telecom and Vodafone must do to help government agencies on security matters. But Mr Kumar, mega CEO and former head of Internet New Zealand, is concerned the bill will give the government unprecedented and far-reaching powers that will not only impact the privacy of New Zealanders, but the ability of internet providers essentially to do their business. Mr Kumar joins me now from Wellington. Good morning, Mr Kumar. Thanks for joining us this morning. You've put a number of official information requests in on this bill. What have you found out?
Well, what I was keen to do was to try and understand why the government was going down the particular path that it is. And certainly, we didn't want to be labelled as being misinformed. So I put in one request under the Official Information Act in my personal capacity, asking for what evidence the government had to include service providers, and also what position they took on the encryption and decryption of communications.
OK, so take me through it. What did you find out? What can, in essence, the GCSB access?
So there's probably the best way to look at it is that there's 2 levels of interception. The first is, as you've mentioned, companies like Telecom and Vodafone, which are internet service providers. They are completely covered under the new law and will have to provide the government with lawful interception capabilities. The government is also going to legislate for itself the discretion that just in case it requires to do so in the future, it can include service providers. And service providers are companies like Google, Microsoft, Facebook. But they also include New Zealand companies, which pretty much any company that has an internet component to it. And that's a lot of discretion without any evidence or without any consultation with these service providers.
Tell me what you mean by interception capabilities. Intercept what?
Well, as the information flows on the internet, the surveillance agencies, which in this case is the SIS, the GCSB, the police, and any other government department that Cabinet decides to include in that list. The surveillance agencies will have the ability in real time to intercept on the basis of a warrant or an authorization the data that is flowing across the internet. Now, there are possibilities that the data that is flowing is encrypted. And in that case, the law will require the decryption of that data.
OK, well, and let's talk about Mega, because that essentially offers an encryption service. That's part of what it is. Will you be able to comply with this legislation?
Well, no New Zealand companies or anyone else overseas who's covered by the law has a choice whether to comply or not. The question is, what is the cost of that compliance going to be? And the way I see it is there's billions of dollars that over the next few years where the New Zealand internet industry, the ICT industry, is going to suffer. So it's by no means a marginal change.
So in essence, it's the telcos who will be paying to provide the information that the spy agencies have requested. Not only will they have to pay to be internet interception capable, they will also have to pay for that surveillance operation too.
Yes, the law will require them to bear their own costs. But it's not only the actual cost that I'm really worried about, it's the opportunity cost. Right now, a lot of the internet companies are moving away from the US and are looking for a home where privacy can be protected and balanced quite well with national security. New Zealand has this wonderful opportunity to become that privacy protective area, just like Iceland and just like Switzerland. Now, unfortunately, all of that is going to Europe instead of excluding the UK. OK, so let's look at the warrants that will be requested to access information. That you will see this warrant. It's for perhaps an email that I may have sent. There won't be a requirement for a warrant
for their person that I'm sending that information to, will there? In other words, there will be innocent parties who will be caught up in this, surely.
Yes, it will. And unlike the GCSB bill, where the term metadata wasn't very well defined, this bill has a term called call-associated data, which in effect is metadata. And so there is an explicit provision that there will be warrants or authorization for metadata or call-associated data, which does bring in exactly what you've said, that it may or may not have access to the content, but it will have access to who the email is from, who it went to. And it's that collective information that describes relationships that is perhaps the most privacy-negative aspect of the bill.
Right. So this, in essence, one assumes, is going to change the relationship a little bit between telcos and their customers. So Vodafone, Telecom, 2 degrees, and the people who use these service providers. In essence, you know, they can't guarantee privacy anymore, can they?
Well, at the moment, the telcos are already in that position, and the government's justification for secrecy is that it already exists. Now, that justification is flawed in 2 ways. One is that secrecy isn't working, and the second is once it's extended to service providers, we now have a position where a service provider has to prove a negative. That is just like Chinese companies such as Huawei, which are under suspicion that they have a government backdoor, they can't prove a negative. And so we'll have New Zealand service providers now somehow having to convince their customers in New Zealand and overseas that they don't have a government backdoor. And proving a negative is almost impossible.
But the reality is here, isn't it? I think what we've all learned now is that, you know, it's foolish to put anything in an email anymore or let that information flow across the internet. I think that's what we've all learnt from this, haven't we?
I'm not sure everyone's learned that yet. I certainly think the message needs to go out. And the equivalent of the email or physically is sending a postcard, which the postal system and the postee can read. And that's why I think encryption is a really good idea. Even for routine emails, all it does is it provides an envelope around the letter.
All right, although just quickly, encryption certainly is something that has been criticised because people would argue that allows terrorists, you enable terrorists by allowing encryption, and also, you know, the spread of child sexual abuse photography and things like that.
Yes, that's a misunderstanding of how encryption works. There's a difference between privacy, which is the right to control your information and data, and being anonymous, which means you won't be able to find out your identity. But I think that most mainstream providers, including Mega, are aiming for privacy rather than helping people being anonymous online.
Okay, Mr Kumar, CEO of Me, we have to leave it there. Thank you.